You're now tuned in to the original podcast of A Stronger Foundation. Welcome. Some call me Doctor, others call me Master T. You can call me anytime. I'm Sweet T, the academic architect PDO. That's planner, designer, and overseer of the academic success plan for kids. So tell your neighbor or call somebody and let them know it's that time. Hey y'all, let's get building. Welcome aboard. This podcast is called Will Their Shoes Fit? A rhetorical. So, the Academic Architect podcasts are directed at parents, but I also speak to children audiences directly. I basically give them the same information except I take a more kid friendly approach. But it's not easy to get kids to understand about the future life that they will live. It's actually difficult for them to see past their next play date to how they will actually one day be adults. So, the most effective way that I have found for helping them to understand is by using a conveyor belt analogy. Now, in the kids show that I do, I tell the kids that they're on a conveyor belt. They can pretty much all relate to that from being at the airports. So I explain that this conveyor belt will take them all the way to their adult self. It never stops, I assure them. You can never get off and you cannot swap places with anyone else. Regardless of the academic choices made while you are a child, you will surely become an adult, and when you arrive at your adult self, the question is, will your shoes fit? Surprisingly, this really gets their attention. See, I just believe that kids should be informed because they have a right to be aware of the consequences of acquiring a good versus insufficient education. Yes, children should understand that they can shape their destinies and that they have the power to structure the path leading to them becoming brains or bricks. Now, just as it is unethical to be aware of a potent virus outbreak and deciding to intentionally withhold information from people in order to prevent fear of, or panic, it is also unethical to withhold from informing children of how a present choice to forego hard studying now could affect their life forever. By neglecting to make a child aware of their role in achieving success, it's like robbing their right to prepare. It's human nature to prepare when there is warning. But what if no one sounds the alarm? How else will a child be informed? During wild weather seasons, channels they send out alerts and warnings the moment a hurricane begins to form. They warn people of the dangers and make suggestions for the best actions to take in order to remain safe. At that point, it is up to the individuals to decide how to respond to this warning, whether they will take heed or ignore the warnings. In so doing, they make a conscious decision to accept the consequence that may result from their decision. But kids are not warned. They are shielded. Now, it's one thing to shield a child who will inherit great riches from being for being heir of a billionaire, and thus they may never ever have the need to pick up a pencil in their entire life. Yet still, they will be able to pass on billions to their heirs. But it's another thing to shelter a child who may endure great struggles in life due to not receiving warnings of the oncoming threats to their future comfort. The very moment that weather stations send out warnings, people begin to store up supplies that will sustain them during the storm. When it comes to children, many parents believe that a child should not have to worry about their future comfort. And with that, I completely agree. Because when a storm is on the way, parents don't worry or burden a child about taking a key role in protecting themselves. That is the parent's role to secure certain measures to ensure the safety of the child. Sometimes we prepare for the storm and it never comes, but just in case we were ready. Sometimes people decide to wait and watch the storm to see if it will indeed present danger and end up regretting their decision of waiting until it was too late. How this applies to children is that they must be informed about the benefits and consequences of education. However, just like with the storm analogy, in which parents don't leave it up to the child to board up the windows, in the same way, a parent should not expect that a child can be responsible for making hard academic decisions. That is the parent's role to build an academically strong support about the child in preparation for the approaching storm. In terms of education, if you've been following the episodes in order, then the storm represents the drop off zone and the Great Divide. Parents must avoid the tendency to ignore the warnings that will create havoc for their children later on. They must begin to own their moral responsibilities for securing a strong academic foundation for their children with the same degree of urgency that they would embrace in the situation of preparing for an approaching hurricane. The aftermath of a hurricane can be quite catastrophic, and many victims claim that they wish they were better prepared. Essentially, a late warning is like no warning at all, and that, according to my personal conviction, is wrong. My final note on this point is that many parents have said that they would push harder to prepare their child academically, but due to how much the child cries and put up great resistance to doing school related work, they just back off for the sake of peace. But which parent have you ever heard of that upon receiving the warnings from the weather station decided to consult their child regarding whether or not they would like to be protected during the storm? Which parent has ever sought the approval of their children to board up the house and stock up the pantry in order to promote the child's safety? Do parents ask a child, honey, do you mind if I place a board over your window in order to enhance your chance of staying safe in the storm, even though doing so will make you a bit uncomfortable? You won't be able to see outside, honey, and your room will be pretty dark. And if the AC happens to break, you may be really hot because you won't be able to open the window to get breeze from outside. Is that okay with you? I mean, if it's a problem and if it will make you uncomfortable, we absolutely won't do it because we just want you to be happy. But what about their safety? Giving the child that decision would basically result in them putting their comfort above their safety. It's what kids do. So parents don't seek a child's approval to protect them from a storm. So why do they seek the child's permission to place them in a program simply because the child may find it uncomfortable? Would a parent in the middle of a hurricane remove the shutters from the child's windows in order to appease the child who complains about the heat and darkness, even when they know from experience that doing so will bring greater risk to this child? Or would the parents simply find alternative ways of comforting the child without removing the safety measures? When it comes to hard studying, it's normal for kids to complain. They will present strong arguments about the discomfort of the rigor. However, failure to install academic shutters in your child's educational dome will allow strong winds to enter and cause lifelong damage. In another analogy of the biblical story of the wise and foolish virgins, both were informed that at some point in the near future that the bridegroom would be visiting. Immediately, they all began to prepare. However, whereas the wise prepared themselves for the unknown arrival, whether day or night, by filling their lamps with oil, the foolish prepared only for a daytime arrival. So, as the parable goes, when the bridegroom appeared after dark, only the wise had been adequately prepared for the meeting. But consider this. What if the bridegroom had come during the day when there was natural lighting? Both the wise and foolish would have been able to participate in the meeting, and essentially, both would have won. If that had been the case, I could just imagine how the foolish would have taunted the wise. During the meeting, the foolish would have connivingly looked over at the wise and be like, y'all did the most. Because in that case, the foolish would have gotten lucky in that even though they did not apply the extra effort, they still benefited equally, just like the wise who had prepared or done the most. In terms of luck, that is how it would be today for a student who escaped the consequences of a weak academic foundation by winning the lottery as an adult. But do we need to discuss how rare a chance that outcome would be? Or the fact that in many cases, how lottery winners quickly lost their sudden fortune and returned to a life of poverty? But unfortunately, this is how many parents find comfort in dealing with the guilt of not enforcing strong learning for their children. They cross their fingers and hope for good luck. They figure that maybe the child will either win the lottery, get discovered by Hollywood, or be drafted in the big leagues. And so they leave the shutters wide open and either fail or hesitate to put up other forms of protection that will protect the child, whether they must confront a storm or not. An academic plan will ensure the child will be ready for the unknown. So let's turn the corner to explain the topic of the podcast. Will their shoes fit? Back in episode 1, I showed a visual explanation of what I call the drop-off zone. I explained the process which takes kids off their designated course that leads to their ideal future self, the person they were designed and purposed to be. That is why we are all so unique as individuals, because our life purpose was specifically and intentionally designed only for us. In other episodes, I've explained how kids transition process from childhood to adulthood, how it's like that conveyor belt we talked about earlier. The conveyor belt never stops, even after the academic drop off zone. The belt continues to transport the child towards their adult future self. So here's my rhetorical. At the end of your child's academic journey, when they arrive at their future self, will their shoes fit? Come on now. Did you still fit in the shoes you wore as a child? No. We all get to a point in life when we must step out of our childhood shoes and into our adult shoes. But in many cases, the shoes that were designed for us did not fit. So we had to have them altered. But the point is that the shoes that are designed for us are the ideal pair that were created to help us step into the greatness associated with our specific and intentional design. So let me ask again, at the point, at that time, when your child arrive at their future self, will their shoes fit? Or will they be too big or too small, too narrow, too wide, too high, too low? Let's journey through one more analogy, the story of Cinderella. And now to speed up the story, let's get to the point that let's get to the point I want to make. So we're going to speed up the story. So I'll skip the part when Cinderella and her sisters all came to the foot of their destinies. Yeah, let's go there. Basically, those shoes could have fit anyone, even the sisters. But based on the author's purpose and intention, they wanted to create a central message that being evil will distort your feet and prevent you from fitting the enchanted shoes. The reason why I said that any of the sisters could have possibly fit the shoe is because, based on the fictitious nature of the story, if they had been kind to Cinderella, they too would have been beautiful and have an equally beautiful enchanted slipper of their own, and maybe even their very own prince. But that's not how the story went. In contrast, the stepsisters were forced to watch and witness what could have been. The other factor here is that they had to watch from the ground floor as Cinderella rose like cream to the top. The stepsisters were forced with the choice of accepting an alternative pair of shoes because they had not prepared adequately to fit into the pair that was destined for them. And by the way, we are all still on our conveyor belts. That's where we are now, and it's still rolling. So I have a question for us to ponder. Are we living our best life? And did we fit our shoes? Now, if your work situation is one in which you are the brick behind someone else's brain, then we will just leave this as your rhetorical. But in the meantime, remember that my mission is to help children by inspiring the decision makers in their lives to see the significance and feel the urgency of aligning their child's steps to fit the shoes they will need to wear tomorrow in order to walk the ideal path that was destined for them. Thank you so much for listening.